test, just to play, just to try, try it out, see what happens, film some things, see how it goes, you know? And then you learn and you go, okay, well, I can't control this. I could control that. I could do this. I couldn't do that. Okay, well, how do I work with that? Then you're going to have questions. You're going to have things. Then you're going to come back. And if somebody has some experience, you're going to know what to ask them. But if you haven't done any of that stuff, you're not going to know what to ask them. You're going to be an inexperienced person. So all your plans are nonsense because you're planning in theory. And in theory and reality do not line up without experience. Experience is the glue that bonds theory and reality together. And without experience, those two things are very separate atmospheres that do not exist in the same realm.
This is Way of the Artist with Brandon Colby Cook and Evan Schulte, identifying your blocks and demystifying your struggles so that you can claim your own path and make your life a work of art.
Well, it took us a little while to get here, but here we are with You'll Find Your Way on the Way. I think we got some interesting avenues to discuss with this one. We talk a lot. I mean, we are called Way of the Artist after all. So, everything is kind of about the way, finding your way. What is your way? And that whole exploration and all of the facets and branches of what that all means. And I think if we've learned anything about this, Brandon, is that there's no set thing. It's never set. It's never something that you can just like grab onto and that's it. And, you've never arrived at any point. And in fact, actually, there was a quote that I shared with you, which was part of what has spurred on this conversation from Lao Tzu, which is the good traveler has no fixed plans and is not intent on arriving. Man, that's like a great quote for Way of the Artist. Here has a lot to say, but I think we're going to get into a lot of things. I'm really interested in particular about like just letting things kind of fly, letting your stuff, just allowing yourself to share your stuff and how we are more often more ready than we think we are, and how we can unnecessarily delay and hinder ourselves, and the wisdom and value of just to allowing yourself to just take action.
Well, Evan, I didn't know you were going to stop there.
I didn't know I was going to stop there either. So I thought, I'm like, am I about to say something else? I guess not.
I was waiting with bated breath. Taking action. It's an important part of your journey. I mean, if you don't do anything, none of it really matters or adds up to anything. So at some point you got to take action. And I think like part of what we're talking about, and I think this is going to go in a bunch of different arenas. So I don't even know really like how to say this is where it's going, but I can say that like a lot of the time you're on the journey already before you figure out where you're even going. And I think that there's this confusion that somehow you need to know where you're going before you even take your first step. And I just don't think that's true. I think a lot of the time you think you know where you're going when you take your first step and you go, okay, well, this is where I'm going. And then you walk along that path a little ways and then you realize, actually, no, I'm going over here. And I thought I was going there, but I'm actually going over here. And the problem for the procrastinator and the person who basically just never takes action is that they always are just plaguing themselves with like, I got to figure out where I'm going. I got to be organized and planned and sorted out. And they don't make room for the fact that this whole path that you think you're on is just kind of made up as you go. And I think for the people who are very, they like structure and they want things to be very linear and they want things to be very predictable. you have a tough time with this kind of stuff because you spend an incredible amount of time in your planning stages. And then just think about it. Your plans are worth nothing. And I mean nothing unless you take action on them. And there's so many people out there who sit around planning all day and never taken action. And literally, guys, you have never gotten anything done. Planning means zero in the real world. It's all in your head. It's all made up. Nothing counts until you actually do it. So the action takers, although sometimes careless and unplanned, tend to get more done than the planners simply because they just do it and they figure it out as they go. And so here's the thing. If you're a planner and you're a procrastinator, what you're actually like, if you identifies that, like if you notice that about yourself, what's happening is I want you to recognize that you're a very intelligent person, because intelligent people tend to plan. They tend to procrastinate and they tend to work it out and get it organized. Mm-hmm. Problem is intelligence is not always your best friend. And it's great to be intelligent, but sometimes it's good to just be a dumbass. I mean, like, I honestly, I'm just telling you this because like at a certain point, you just have to say like, I'm too smart for my own good. I need to just take an action and get this ball rolling.
Well, yeah, there's a number of interesting things because like for me, I understand as somebody who has procrastinated a lot in their lives.
Oh, smart, Evan. But too smart like, for your own good.
Yeah, like it is like you're using your intelligence against yourself. Procrastination is fear. Like let's call it for what it is. Procrastination is not, to say that it's just procrastination is laziness is actually lazy itself, is a lazy understanding fear. Of it. Yeah,
for a lot of people believe that as well.
Totally, yeah. Absolutely. It's all just a fear, and in many ways, planning is a defense mechanism. We're trying to defend and protect ourselves from something, which and look, planning has. I'm not saying that there's no sense in planning, but as you said, planning is absolutely useless if it's never ever turned into any kind of action, if it doesn't actually spur you into action. I think I've said this a few times in the last number of weeks, but I'm more and more convinced that the function of planning is just to get you out the door. Like that's it for me, at least. That's how planning functions best for me. But I know that I've used planning in the past to protect myself to a point of not actually getting my shit out there. Not actually daring to do that thing, trying to have the perfect solution and answer to any possible thing that might come up. The problem is that you're gonna inevitably and sometimes very suddenly come up to something that you didn't plan for. Like it's pretty much inevitable. So I think that there's this fear of making a mistake from my own experience of dealing with procrastination and that fear and that anxiety that you're living with, is that it feels like, for me, it's this general fear of falling into a hole that I can't get out of, making a mistake that I can't recover from, that something going wrong that will be the end of me, kind of thing. It's just, and it's always generalized. It's nothing specific, right? It's then maybe like, oh, my reputation will be ruined. I'll have no money. I'll have, like if this doesn't work, or what if people don't like me? What if people, talk bad about me? What if all of this fails? And the thought of never being able to recover from that, not being able to handle that, not being able to whatever, to respond adequately. And for the most part, I've begun to realize how unnecessary and untrue a lot of those thoughts are, and how actually you often find that people are a lot more supportive than you think. I think sometimes you're looking out there at like a scary world and feeling like, oh, like people are going to just, you know, they're going to hate this and they're going to try. And hey, look, there's a reality to that. We live in a society, in a culture with technology where people will just troll. People will just talk shit. That does exist. But for the most part, people are pretty decent. You know, people are pretty decent. And just as a reminder, the trolls, like, they're not worth a half a second of your thought. The things they have to say in their comments are not worth a fucking ounce of your energy. Nothing. Anyone who just wants to shit talk, anyone who just wants to tear down and just be bitter and criticize and like these people, like, I have sympathy and empathy because I have a sense of where that comes from. But for you as a person who's trying to put yourself out there, particularly when it's a scary thing, and it's always a scary thing on some level, but it's just not worth it. It's not worth a second of your energy and effort in worrying about what people like that have to say. So, yeah, there's just, I just wanted to cover it. There's this fear of, I think, falling into like this hole that you just won't get out of. And for one, that's just not really true. And something that you were talking about, Brandon, and I'll turn it over to you, but it's this thing of you don't know necessarily what you have to do until you're doing it. Sometimes just getting out there actually tells you and directs you through the immediate response to doing it, of what actions you got to take, where you got to go next. That planning just can't address. So, Brandon. I know I ranted there. I ranted for a bit.
Oh, man. There's lots to say. I think it was Jim Rohn. I think it was him who said this. I could be wrong. But it was something along the lines of the closest thing that some people will ever get to success is taking a bite out of you. The closest they'll ever taste success is taking a bite out of you. Something like that. I mean, like, look, if you're doing it, if you're in the arena, you're fighting the battle, you're winning. That is life, man. That's life. Life is not about always winning the fight. It's about being in the fucking fight. Be in the fight, man. Be in the fight. This is what we should celebrate. We should celebrate the person that shows up to the battle. You know, it's great to see the person win the battle, but the person who shows up to the battle, man, that is the battle most of the time. When you're in a fight, I've been in fights before. I've been in many. It's not something I like to do, but I had to be in fights. And there were certain fights that I had to be into where I had to show up, and I was the sure loser. I was the person that was not supposed to be there. But there's a certain point in your life where you've taken enough shit and you just say, you know what, win or fucking lose, I'm going to show up. And what I found out is that my interpretation of myself was not as accurate as it was, because the fire in me to defend myself was so much stronger than the bully that thought they could threaten me. And even if they were bigger and stronger and they had more fight experience, there's fire in you when you show up. There's something about showing up that you go, it's just do or die, because I'm here now and I have to do it. I have to do it. It's my life. And your dreams are like that. You know, you think like maybe, you know, you're not ready, you don't have it together, you don't know enough, whatever. But the thing is like the things you want in life, there's so much more spirit in you than you realize is in you. And you're never going to find out what's inside of you until you're in the arena. And the only way you're ever going to enter the arena of life is by entering it and doing it and stepping into it. And it's frightening. And look, don't get me wrong, but these trolls and these cowards, because that's what they are, they've never walked in the arena, because nobody who's ever been in the arena ever trolls anybody. I can tell you that, because the thing is that all the people that are really doing the shit that you want to do, we don't troll each other because we're in it and we know what it's like. It's fucking brutal at times. And you don't troll each other because you know that it's brutal enough just being in there at times. We know how hard it is. And I include myself in that arena because I make an effort as much as I possibly fucking can to step into the arena of life. Whether that means asking out the girl I like, making the movie I want to make, doing the thing I want to do, going to the meeting that I don't think I'm ready for. You walk into it and you do your best. And then you find out, you learn, you're going to make mistakes. And yeah, you know, are there going to be losers out there that point out the mistakes that you made? Sure there are. But those losers are not making those mistakes, so they can go fuck themselves as far as I'm concerned. And look, yes, I'm being a little bit brash here, but I'm fighting for the dreamer. I'm not fighting for the fucking coward. I'm fighting for the courageous one, which is you on the other end of this, listening to this podcast. In my opinion, you're the courageous one, because only the coward would ever knock what I just said. The courageous person would go, fucking bravo, Brandon. Yes, I get it. That makes sense to me. Dare I go into my life and take a bold step towards the arena of whatever my dreams are? You know, it sounds very poetic, but honestly, like, that's just me saying the truth. Go out there, step into it. You're going to find out how to fight by being in the fight. You know what I mean? And look, sometimes you got to get beat up. It's just part of life. Just take your hits, move on, learn, grow, advance. You know, you'll learn. Sometimes you got to get beat up to know what you need to learn. It's just, but you'll survive. Most of this shit, you'll survive. That's the most important thing to remember. You know, it's just a knock. It's just a bruise. It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it usually isn't. And, yeah, even in my own experience, I've noticed that the mistakes I've made, sometimes I go, oh shit, I could have done, but normally it's just like, oh, I could have done that better.
Yeah.
You know, and great. Learn how to do that better. There's never been anything that's unrecoverable from, because normally I find that the mistakes that you have are never more than you can handle. You know, they kind of come at you in like little bits and pieces, and it's a gradual, steady, progressive kind of a movement, right? But yeah, there's something to this whole thing that really I connect with, and for me is something that I wish that I had learned when I was younger, but really learning that I was more ready than I thought for so many different things. You know, this feeling of like, I'm not ready. You know, there's so many people who are just smarter and better and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. You know, like, you can make up all kinds of excuses. And for one, not only are other people not necessarily, you know, better or smarter than you are, it's just, as we've been saying, it's usually just people who have dared to step into the arena, the people who have dared to actually start putting a foot into it, you know, and yeah, maybe you take a few shots, but like, it's never more than you can handle. And you grow and you grow and you grow and you grow and that's how you become, you know, we were talking a bit before we started recording, like, about authority, and neither of us are are particularly keen on the idea of authority. But in some ways, that's how you start to become something that we might call an authority, is by going out there and you do it. That's how any real authority has come to do it. Real authority, but that's a whole other conversation. I actually don't want to get into that. So I'm going to just back away slowly from that conversation for a second. But this thing of, you know, the ideas that we have about being ready. I remember years ago when I went and did a trip to Europe by myself when I was a much younger man. Well, I guess not much younger, but you know, I was a young man going to Europe by myself, and I had some stuff, you know, because like I had places that I was planning to go and see and whatever. I had some things, but most of the trip, just as a sidebar, was stuff that I never expected to happen. I knew kind of where I was going to be, but I didn't know what was going to happen when I was there necessarily. Almost 95% of the time. And getting ready for it, one of the pieces of advice that continually kept up was pack your bag. And once you've packed your bag, take out half of everything that's in there. Take out half. I actually didn't really follow that advice. I maybe took a few things out. And in retrospect, I was like, I wish I didn't pack as much shit as I packed. I think I actually ended up leaving some things behind because I was just like, oh, I bought stuff. I have things that I'm taking with me now. And now I've got to haul all this shit with me. So there's like, to me, it's an apt metaphor in terms of this whole thing with readiness. There's the stuff that you pack because you think that you need it, but it actually is going to just hinder you and slow you down in the long run, because you're going to find out what you actually need and what you actually want. And there's going to be things that you're going to want to take on. There's going to be things that you're just like, oh, you know what? I want to buy these clothes. I want to buy this souvenir. I didn't know I was going to want it, but that's actually what I want. That's the direction to take now. So I need to take that on. And it means that something else has to go. Some part of the plan, some part of the preparation has to be let go of. Right? So I think that we get hung up in this thing of like, I'm not ready. And I just want to encourage people. It's like, you are probably totally ready. You're at least more ready than you think. And maybe you're not entirely ready for the big vision that you have in your mind, the big vision that you have in your heart, but you're ready for a piece of it. You're ready for some piece of it, enough that there's something that you can do to put your foot into the arena, to borrow from your metaphor again, Brandon.
I think one of the big things is to remember it's not going to go perfect. You know, like get that right out of your head. And only trolls think that everything should go perfect. People who are in the arena, you know, you get cut, you know, you get nicked, you get bumped, you trip, you stumble, things happen, you know, it's not perfect. And this whole pursuit of perfection is just, it's crazy talk, guys. It's crazy talk, you know, like just do your best. And look, not all of us start from the same place. So don't compare yourself to other people either. I mean, some people, you know, they start at a different place than you do. They're not going to make the same mistakes you make. You might be making mistakes that seem obvious later after you've made them, but like, you don't know. Like you can make excuses in life, or you can just make reasons to do things. And excuses, like if you want your whole life to be an excuse, then sit around all day planning and prepping and trying to be perfect and procrastinating and doing all those P words that I just threw out there. But you can go do that, and you can just, like, you know, you can let your life pass you by, and then you know what? Maybe one day, maybe you'll take an attempt, and you know what you'll find out anyway? You didn't plan well enough. You weren't prepared enough. You know, you did it too soon. You didn't procrastinate long enough. It's all going to be a fucking mess, and you're going to be in a mess regardless. So why not just get into the mess now? Because that's what you actually want to do. And the other alternative is, if there's something you really want to do, we have a weird way of talking ourselves out of it as time goes on. It's not like preparation and planning actually makes you more invested in it. Actually, in a weird way, it actually makes you less invested in it. It's usually the person that does it on a whim, that flies by the seat of their pants, that actually is more invested than the person who has done all the planning, all the preparation, all the schoolwork, all the blah, 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 blah to try and get ready. It's usually the person that just went in and did it. And so, like, your whole life can just pass you by trying to plan for it. And I'm going to tell you one thing. I mean, it sounds so obvious, but you're alive right now. And I can tell you from personal experience that tomorrow is not guaranteed. So you're alive right now. And right now is what you do. And if you want to wait, that's what you're doing. And if you want to do it, that's what you're doing. But you're either waiting or you're doing it. So I say, why don't you just take a fucking gamble on you? Why don't you bet on you? You know, stop gambling on preparation. Stop gambling on preparation. Stop gambling on procrastination and perfection. Stop gambling on that shit. Why don't you gamble on you? Because you're alive now and this is happening now and your life is right now. And you do not know that tomorrow exists. You really don't. You think you do. You think you have time, but you don't know that for sure. And the only thing you're going to be wishing if you were dying tomorrow is that I wish I did it. That's all that's going to matter. If it really matters to you, if it's truly in your heart, that's all that's going to matter. So why not just do it and die doing it? Die doing it. Don't die waiting on it. Don't die procrastinating about it. There's so much more in us than we give ourselves credit for. And I think like that's a big thing about this talk, right? It's like, you're going to find out on the journey where to go. You're going to find out where you need to go and what you need to do, but you're already going to be walking it. You're all going to be on it. And you know what? Most authority figures that you look up to, half of them are bullshit. They've never even walked the path. They've read a book on the path and they're telling you what they have learned from other people and studied of other people. Those people don't even listen to them because they're useless. Then there's the other people that are on the path. None of them have made it to the final destination, guys. None of them. They're all on a certain part of their journey, and they're telling you based on the experience they've had to the degree that they've gotten along the journey. Those are the action takers. Those are the only people you should listen to in life. And none of them have gotten to their final destination, because even if they did get to where they thought they were going to get, they just set a new destination and they're walking that one now. But you might respect the fact that, hey, like this person took a few steps in that direction and like maybe they could tell me a thing or two, you know? So why don't you be one of those people who actually walk the path? And you might walk it wrong, but hey, look, you can look back to everyone else and say, look, this is not the way to go. I already walked down that way. I made a total mistake. It was not the right way to go. I'm going this way now. And you know what? There's something in that. There's something valuable in you doing that. It helps everyone who comes after you, but it also helps you because then you learn what's the wrong way to go. And you're going to learn some things from that. It's not theory. It's reality. It's the real deal. You know, you're in it, you're doing it.
Yeah. You know, like sometimes Brandon and I like to just throw out whenever we're thinking of any topic and trying to hash out what we're trying to say and get some clarity around it. We ask like, well, how does the master artist practice this? How does a master artist, you know, whatever art they're in, but how does the master artist, what is their mentality? What is their outlook, their perception on this? And a master artist, before they engage in any work, or when they engage in any work, recognizes that it is full of unexpected things that are going to come up. There's an understanding that it is a journey that does not necessarily have an answer to it. It's, there's this great quote, and I'm sure lots of people have heard it, but it's like, it's like, don't try to have the answers today that you don't have. Live the questions, and perhaps in some distant future you will stumble into the answers. Right? Like it's the question is so often more important. And that's very often what I think a great artist comes in with, is a question. You know, what if? What would this be like? What would, you know, like it's that question. And that question is asked on the canvas, the metaphorical canvas. Let's expand our idea of what that means in this one. But you know, you ask that question on the canvas, and you see what comes out of it. And maybe there's an answer there, maybe there isn't an answer there. But maybe there's a perspective there. Maybe there's, who knows, right? But the thing is that you don't know. The master artist doesn't know what's there until they're doing it. You know, I've heard Daniel Day-Lewis in an interview talk about his annoyance essentially at a lot of the press kits that are done during the filming of a movie, because, you know, he's pulled aside, you know, and sat in a chair, you know, like on the set somewhere, and is being asked about, you know, what has the process been like or whatever. And I remember his answer was, I don't fucking know. I'm in the middle of this process, right? Like, how am I supposed to answer that?
Yeah.
How am I supposed to, like, I'm in the middle of it. And whether there's any sort of answer to that, like, it's not going to happen now. It's not going to, we're not going to find it, right? We just need to sometimes commit ourselves to the process, commit ourselves to the question, commit ourselves to just stepping out with that vision and seeing what happens, seeing what comes from it, seeing what we can learn. And, you know, it's through those things where you really start to find your place to a certain extent. Like, I know, as also being, you know, a person who runs a business as well, that I've gone through all sorts of different, like, journeys in terms of how, like, I'm communicating to people about what I do. And to a large degree, it's because it's only through doing it. It's only been through teaching, as well as, you know, running different aspects of the business, that I've come to understand more clearly what it is that I'm actually doing. And not just what I'm doing, but what I'm actually passionate about doing. But I've only started to figure that out through that process of starting. It's like, okay, well, this is what I think this is about. This is what I think I'm doing. Right? And that's the closest thing that I have right now at this moment. And you go with it, and there's nothing wrong with it. But then you go about for a little while and you start to go, oh, shit, this is actually more of what I'm doing. So now I can communicate that, right? I can communicate that. And then and it's continued to evolve, and I'm sure it's going to continue, you know, forever and ever and ever. You know, where there's just, you commit to just being more truthful to yourself. You know, you commit to just being more honest with yourself about what you're doing, what you really love, what you really care about. I think that's really, for me, a huge part of it. And you just, when you continue to do that, and you have that commitment and that pursuit to do what's in your heart and to actually do it, that you start to figure it out. You know, like, it's, I think we've said before that, you know, you lead with your heart and your head will pick it up. You know, your heart, like your head will pick up the pieces, you know, but you lead with the heart, because, like, your brain will catch up. Your brain will catch up, but it can't give you that thing that the heart has inside of it. Mm-hmm. Which is the key for you. The mind is just a tool. It's a tool for that inner part of yourself to work with, right? To actually kind of turn things and work with things and shape things. And that's all great. That's all wonderful, but it's not the leader in this arrangement. It shouldn't be the leader in this whole arrangement. I know I've been talking a bit. There was one last thing that I had wanted to say. Yes, it's that just, I want to reiterate that commitment to expressing that thing that's in your heart, which is a passion, but is often a question about something. And you take action on that, and you express it, and you bring it out, and you will start to figure things out. And then you're not living by some fixed plan. The plan can change at any moment, and the plan can change at any moment intelligently. It doesn't mean that anything is a failure. It actually means it's a success, right? When you're responding to your life and to your passion in that way, that's operating in the world with real intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Hey everybody, this is Evan, and this episode is brought to you by my book. Yes, I recently released a book called The Actor's Awakening, Connecting Spirituality to Craft. Expand yourself as an actor and your craft through a spiritual perspective. Take a journey that will explore universal philosophies and insights to help you understand human nature in a profound way, and develop practices to take your work to another level. Again, that's The Actor's Awakening, Connecting Spirituality to Craft, available on Kindle and paperback on Amazon. And as always, if you like the show, please subscribe.
I find often you get to a certain point on your path of actually taking action, and then new things are revealed to you. And so then with those new things that are revealed, you make different decisions than you would have initially. But it took you to getting to that point before you could realize something. And so the whole game of theorizing and planning, to me, is like, it's first of all, this is my opinion, and look, it might not be fact, but like, in my opinion, most people who plan and theorize are full of shit if they don't have any experience. Because the only reason why theory and planning actually works is because you have experience to base it upon, to have a reference point of. If you have no experience, theory and planning are useless to you. Like, literally useless. They're so useless. It's profound. Yes, there's probably some realm of planning that works, some realm of theory that helps, but like mostly they're garbage. Like, let's take it into filmmaking, because that's my like main thing. But like, until you've made a film, you know jack, in my opinion. You know jack shit. And I'm not even going to pull a punch on that. You know jack shit until you've pointed a camera and called action and watched your actors act. And you've done something, and you've been on set, and you know what that's like. You know jack fucking shit. And I'll say that to fucking anybody, because it's the it's the being in it, it's the trying it, that you start to realize, holy shit, I can't just tell an actor like cry and they're gonna cry. Like a lot of directors who are coming to film school, they think, oh, like, you need to cry, you need to be that's terrible fucking direction, because you don't understand acting, you don't understand the process, you don't understand how this works, you don't understand you're dealing with a human being, that you don't just get to say, push a button and say, do this for me. Maybe if you're working in animation, maybe you can get away with some of that, but there's going to be other problems, I guarantee it. So until you've made an animation film, you probably don't know jack shit either. You got to go do it. You got to go make it. You got to go try it. You know, you got to go fumble around. You got to go bumble around. You got to go do some things, see what happens. And then through that, you're going to find out what doesn't work mostly. And maybe some things will work, and like, congratulations, you know, because like sometimes they do work, and sometimes it's just pure like your vision and your whatever, you stumble across some things that just happen and they're great. But mostly you're going to find out a lot of things that didn't work, because that film, whatever film you make the first time, is going to be the worst film you probably ever make in your entire life, unless you start mailing it in and trying to do something for reasons that are outside of, authentic reasons. But let's say you're doing it authentically. The first film you make is going to be your worst film, and you're going to make a bunch of mistakes. So you might as well learn by doing something that is like just a test, just a play, just to try, try it out, see what happens, film some things, see how it goes, and then you learn and you go, okay, well, I can't control this. I could control that. I could do this. I couldn't do that. Okay, well, how do I work with that? Then you're going to have questions. You're going to have things. Then you're going to come back. And if somebody has some experience, you're going to know what to ask them. But if you haven't done any of that stuff, you're not going to know what to ask them. You're going to be an inexperienced person. So all your plans are nonsense, because you're planning in theory. And in theory and reality do not line up without experience. Experience is the glue that bonds theory and reality together. And without experience, those two things are very separate atmospheres that do not exist in the same realm most often. So most look at great filmmakers. They generally were playing around with their cameras and trying different things. And then they started to figure out what worked. And then that's what you know them for, because through their experience, they figured out how to match theory with practicality. They put it together and they started to figure out, okay, what can I actually do here? It's probably the same for painting and music and acting and everything. I mean, I have some experience in those mediums, but like, I'm not going to like step into that and just say like, this is how it is, but it probably is pretty much the same. If you haven't picked up a paintbrush and you have a theory about what you want to paint and you've never painted anything, you probably don't understand how paint actually works. You don't understand how it hits the canvas. You don't understand how it spills. You don't understand how putting too much weight on something probably causes something. You know what I mean? You don't have that experience. So do it. How many times do I have to say this I'm not saying this because like you guys aren't doing it, but like something I learned from some of my mentors is they kind of go, look, I'm kicking your ass right now. This is what they say. I'm kicking your ass right now, but I'm not doing it to be mean. I'm just kicking your ass because it's like, it helps you to like, to do it. And so I always appreciate that. So like, yeah, like I get it. Like I would do it if I knew better, but you're kicking my ass as though I'm not doing because I don't know better. But it's like you got to do it. Basically, if I'm thinking of a certain particular mentor, they would probably say, look, I'm kicking your ass right now. Stop talking about it, start doing it. You know what I mean? Because this is like what you're talking about. Until you've done it, like we can't talk about anything because you're in la la land.
Yeah, there's a kind of intelligence. There's a kind of intelligence that that is in operation, or that doesn't come into operation until you've started doing something. Like I'm sure every human being can relate to this, where you're learning about how to do something, doing anything, something mundane. Like, yeah, you're learning how to, how to just paint, like just paint your house, like painting a room or something. And someone will say like, oh, watch out. Like if you get too much paint on the brush, it'll start to run. And it's like, oh, okay. So you bank that, but you don't actually really know what too much is. You don't know what that actually looks like. You don't really know what that feels like, but you know it just as an idea. And then you actually put the brush to the wall, and suddenly you go, oh shit, yeah, the paint really does start to run if you got too much paint on it. So that now you've actually learned, you can actually make a real adjustment because you have a real experience with it and a kind of learning and understanding that's come out of it. Hilariously, like situations where, like riding like something like a quad or something like that, like a quad bike or something to that effect, and being told like, oh, be careful, it's got a lot of kick, in the first gear, and you go, oh, okay, and not having ridden this first, and then you hit it and the thing you almost go flying off of it, even though you knew that was a possibility, even though you knew that that could happen. Because you don't know how to necessarily hold your body. You don't know how to, like how you need to prepare yourself on the machine or whatever before you hit the gas, and you don't know at what point that you're pulling on the throttle or pushing on the throttle that it really starts to kick in. Like it's all just theory until you've done it, right? And sometimes you get thrown from the bike on your first time around, right? Like that's why sometimes you wear a helmet, right? There's the things that you can control, there's the things that you can do that are wise, but then there's other things that like you just don't know. And we have to get used to accepting some of this stuff. I think that we spend way too much time trying to prevent and avoid being uncomfortable or having to like get our hands a little bit dirty or our knees a little bit scraped up. There's nothing wrong with that. I was just watching a video from Big Think the other day about like anti-fragility. How we need to become anti-fragile.
Yeah.
Like there's this kind of pressure that we actually thrive in. There's this pressure that actually helps us to grow. And so having a positive relationship with some of those things of pressure. And when you start taking action, you give yourself a certain kind of pressure that you can actually begin to grow from. When you're stuck in the planning / procrastinating stage, there is a pressure that builds, but it's not one that gives you that is as teaching. Like it can teach you, but it really only teaches you after you start to take action, as I've learned in my case, where it's just like, oh shit, yeah, that was a waste of time. I didn't need to spend all this time worrying about being ready for this or whether this was okay. I just needed to actually get out there and start doing it. And now I'm getting the pressure that I need, the pressure that I actually need, as opposed to the pressure of I haven't started yet. Like I haven't taken that step out there. That's, to me, I've learned, is the worst pressure now.
It is the worst pressure.
The worst, yeah. It's like the pressure of having not started something that you've been like working on or putting off or whatever it is. That pressure is so fear-inducing, so anxiety-inducing, so like just it's so crippling, that kind of pressure. So it's much worse than the pressure you face from like, okay, I'm taking action, and now there's things happening, because it's like suddenly there's changes that are going on and there's things to respond to, and you go, oh, okay, like, and it's much more exciting. It's a hell of a lot more fun than that kind of non-action pressure where you're just sitting inside yourself in an unpleasant soup.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too is, I mean, you might have kind of commented on this or at least alluded to it, which is like, the more you prepare and plan, the more pressure you build up in trying to get it right, which is a part of the problem too. I mean, like you spent all this time on planning and prepping, and now if it goes wrong, now it's all the more devastating. Whereas if you just went and did it, you didn't plan or prep, so like you don't have so much pressure on yourself. You make a mistake, you're like, well, I just started, so like who cares, But if you spend all this time doing theory and planning and prepping and all that stuff, you end up building it up into something that it really isn't. You make it into, and somehow I think also you build yourself up into some person who's supposed to be able to perform in a certain way that you're just like, you're not going to be capable of until you actually physically do it. I I mean, it's interesting. Like anybody who's done any type of mechanical stuff will know what I mean. But it's like when you push the gas pedal of a forklift or a side by side or an ATV, or you pull the handle on a dirt bike, right? And you feel that pull, and you don't know how much more it could give because you never even pulled it all the way yet. And if you pull it too hard too quickly, you're like, whoa. Like I remember riding like when I'm in my early 20s, I remember I was on a 150 or 125 bike. I think it was a 150. And I remember I pulled the handle back, and the thing started doing a wheelie. And I was like, oh my God, and I had to put my feet down because I was going to flip the whole bike over. And I didn't even realize how much power the thing had in it because I never really been on one before, And the thing is like, you just don't know the feel of it. And I think one of the big things we're talking about today is just about how, like, when you're on the path of whatever you're doing, there's a feel element that we don't always factor in. It's just feeling it. It's just kind of getting in the groove of like, what's my body sensation and relationship to this? It's so important. And theory just will never teach you that. It will give you ideas. It will kind of give you sometimes options that you don't have, or maybe even directions that you didn't know about. And theory is a wonderful thing to some degree, but in my experience, it really is only valuable once you have experience. Like how to drive a forklift better doesn't matter until you've actually like mobilized the machine. And I've done forklift training, for example. I'm forklift certified. It's one of the machines I know how to drive. And it's a cool machine to drive, honestly. Like I've driven a whole bunch of them and they're not all the same. I've driven electric, I've driven gas, I've driven bigger ones, smaller ones, all sorts of things. But when I did the test, you sit there and you talk about theory and you talk about safety, and all that stuff's good to learn. You should learn about safety. I mean, when you're dealing with machines, you should learn about safety. You should understand some practicality. Don't get me wrong. I don't think you should just throw someone a machine and say, okay, drive it. Lift this heavy thing. Yeah. You shouldn't do that. But there's within reason. I never really learned how to forklift drive until I actually stepped into the machine. And then once I stepped in the machine, all the theory I had learned in the past and everything I learned in the future became relevant. But it really is very, maybe there's an exception to some people, but for most people, you're not going to know until you actually handle the thing you're trying to do, until you actually are in it, doing it, trying it, feeling it. Body feeling is incredibly important in the relationship to knowledge and awareness and growth.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, in particular, there's certain circumstances where you're dealing with where there are safety concerns, but it still goes to prove the point that even in those situations, it's like, okay, we have this theory, but now we have a test. You have to now demonstrate that you can do this, right? Because we distinguish that there is a difference between the theoretical knowledge of it and being able and capable to actually do something. Right. So we still recognize a difference. Another sort of metaphor that came to mind in this conversation is something like water skiing. Like, I don't know if you've ever been water skiing, but I remember learning how to do it. And it's like, people tell you like, okay, like I'm going to do it. It's a little nerve wracking usually learning how to water ski because you see people face plant and maybe you will face plant, but it's like, okay, so you kind of lean back. You want to get the tips of the skis just above the water. You hold the handle out in front of you, and then we'll start pulling. And it's like, and that's, you get some basics about how to just get yourself set up, right? But nothing can prepare you for the first time that you suddenly feel that rope and that handle pull in your hand.
Yeah.
And it starts lifting you out of the water, or you didn't hold your legs like firmly enough, so you just kind of end up flopping forward or whatever it is. So it's like there is that body learning. Like we learn with more than just our minds.
Yeah.
Like our consciousness is a very complex things, and we learn in ways that go beyond just the mind, or at least the conscious mind. So it's like you usually, most people fail a few times trying to get up their first time out water skiing, right? And even the first time you get up, you're shaky, because now you're like, okay, you figured out just a little bit of just the getting up part, but now you got to figure out the standing up part.
Yeah.
Right? Now you got to hold it. Now you're feeling like the water underneath your feet as you're moving. And then you start to get used to that, right? And maybe you get like, there's so many parts of the process, but you start to get more adept at these little things, and they start building up. Next thing you know, you're starting to make yourself turn. You learn how to make yourself be able to move left and right, how to go over the wake. That's always kind of like a terrifying first thing that you try, right? Because it's like, all right, now I don't know how to go over the wake, but now I've got to go and do it. No one can tell you.
Back over the wake.
And come back over the wake, which is is even harder. And like you've got, no one can really tell you the thing. Like it's which is very much like an aspect in stuff like Zen and Zen training, right? Where it's like they'll ask peculiar questions or things. Like, there's like an old story of like a Zen master who was getting old and was going to be dying pretty soon. And so there needed to be a new person to take over. And he had, I think it was like a pot, like a flower pot or something like that in front. And he asked the students, what is this? Like, tell me what this is. And people responded in kind of like a lot of their interesting ways. And then it was like the cook or something who had been there for years and years and years and years. And he came up and he picked up the pot and he smashed it against the wall. And he became the master, allegedly, of the school. Because, there's like, maybe to put it in a bit of a better example of that, it's like the difference between the sound of a gong and the words, the sound of a gong. Right? The difference between the meal and the menu.
Yeah.
So to speak, right? Like it's the theory and the planning and the practice and all of that stuff. That's the theory and the planning and whatever. That's the menu. But it's not the meal. It doesn't have the nourishment. It doesn't have the flavor. It doesn't have the substance. It's all just words at that point. So I don't know. I think I've probably beaten that one bit more than I need to. But
it's a good example though, because like thinking of being warm when you're cold and actually having a fire next to you, there's a difference. And actually thinking about being warm, your mind is powerful. You actually will feel warmer if you really focus on it and you center yourself in that. But you're not getting warmer physically. There's something about the physical part of our world that really matters. And you know what I'm thinking, actually, as we've been talking about this conversation, I mean, it's pretty obvious if you really just stop and put it together, but it's where does the rubber meet the road? And which is a saying of like, you have this very fancy sports car, but if you have really crappy tires on your sports car, I mean, how well is it going to hold to the road? And you can have the most powerful engine, the best gearbox, like the best body of the car and all of that stuff. But the rubber meeting the road really does matter in how well that car will perform when you're talking about an automotive type of situation, right? So, there's a part of the artist where we need to just like look at it like, where does the rubber meet the road? Where do I actually interact with the thing? And my general kind of advice is really just kind of going along the lines of like, look, try to get the rubber to meet the road as soon as possible, because then once you have that feel you're going to know what you can do with your engine, with your body style, with all these other things. Because like, it's just a waste for you to be the super intelligent, capable, skilled, trained person that can't even interact with the real thing. I mean, all your training is for nothing at that point. Am I saying that having a training and preparation and theory is meaningless? No, I'm not. I'm just saying that it doesn't matter unless you go to the basic foundational point, which is, where does the rubber meet the road? Where does the thing actually interact with the thing that matters? Because like, if you think about a car, right, or a vehicle of any sort, but let's just talk about a sports car trying to go around a racetrack. You don't think about it, but the tires and the road are the two most important things of the entire experience. The power of the engine, the body of the car, and all the cool things that it can make the tires do on the road, they're very relevant and they do matter. But they're nothing without the tires, because without the tires, the most powerful engine is really nothing.
Yeah.
And so if you think of yourself as an artist and like a sports car, there's a very just basic part of you. You just need to be rubber meets the road. You just need to think about, how do I actually interact with this? I think acting is a great example of that, because, you have these actors and they go home and they practice their lines and they prepare the scene and they figure out how it's going to go. But until you're actually in the scene, interacting with the other actor, none of that matters. And if you try to stick to it when things go a different way, your performance is going to be crud. So, if you go back to like the basics, and then all your training can come in to assist the basics, wonderful. But if you don't have the basics, really your training and all that other stuff is just useless for you. It's really not going to help you. It's actually going to probably make it worse in a weird way. Yeah.
Yeah. If you don't know how to actually really listen.
Yeah.
That was one of my teachers, he had this sign in his classroom. He had a few of them, but one of them was really talk, really listen.
I mean, it's that is rubber meets the road in acting. Like, really talk, really listen is rubber meets the road.
Yeah.
That's where it begins. Because like, if you're not really talking or really listening, nothing you've learned matters.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. None of the technique will save you in the world if you don't know how to do that.
It'll make it worse. In a weird way, you can be so well trained that you actually do a terrible performance if you don't really listen and don't really talk.
Yeah.
And I mean, we could probably find every rubber meets the road in every art, but I know for acting, though, that is rubber meets the road. That is the touch point between really doing it and theory. You have to really listen and you have to really talk. And if you can do those two things, then everything you learn beyond that becomes, it actually helps it. But without those two things, it all hurts it. It's weird. It's like
totally. I'm glad that we talked, because like that's brought me new depth to that whole saying and
awesome
and everything. So I do appreciate that, because man, there's so many actors who pretend to talk and pretend to listen. It's crazy.
I mean, it really is. It's because what I think of, and I mean, and look, like, I think you have a lot more experience with acting and training actors than I do, but like, I think we learn acting backwards because we want to get into it. We want to do it and we want to do it well. And we've seen what we've seen in movies and we just want to kind of replicate that. I think that's how a lot of people start. I think what I've kind of learned is that, gone through this journey of acting is that, that's one of the things I really have learned to appreciate about Meisner is that if you just listen and respond, you solve a lot of the problems that a really well-trained actor ends up running into. But I feel like a lot of acting classes and stuff, sometimes they try to skip ahead. They try to go like, let's break down the scene and let's understand it. It's like, that's wonderful. You should totally understand the scene. Like, you need to. But like, if you can't even listen to the person, who really gives a shit? Because like it's just going to be so boring. Like acting, it doesn't like everything. Like even driving a sports car, it all just comes down to a very basic thing. But then you build upon a very basic element, right? And I think every art probably does that, you know, to some degree. It probably like I think I'm thinking music, for example. I play guitar a little bit, but something I've learned with the guitar is like if you don't know your chords, good luck trying to play a song. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like you got to know your chords. Like how do your fingers actually go onto the thing? And the ability not only to know the chords, but to move your fingers from one chord to the next. That was one of the most challenging things that I had to learn in the beginning. And I'm sure you're very familiar with this, but like, if you can learn how to do that, you can learn how to play a lot of songs because even if you only know 2 or 3 chords, you have a lot of options all of a sudden, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's I think we got to wrap this one up.
Yeah, okay.
But let's do a quick beer whatever shout out.
Sounds good, man. I'll go first.
Okay, all right, go for it.
Doing it. Okay, this is Valley Brewing. I honestly, I don't even know if I've had this before. I think I have. It's called Namesake Hazy IPA. This is a Alberta brew, so it's local, and I wanted to try a local one to where I'm at. They say it's a flagship, full-bodied, hazy, smooth drinker. It has a pineapple, melon, and peach notes, which it's been delicious. Super tasty, 6.8%. So you're getting it, but it's a good beer. You don't notice the alcohol content, and I'm enjoying it. So there you go.
Nice. I am drinking one that's also up there on the alcohol scale at 6.5%. Not quite up to yours, but I'm drinking one from How Sound Brewing. And this is their limited edition robust porter. And it's raspberry. It's like a raspberry porter. And it's delicious.
Yeah, you seem like you liked it when you took your first sip.
Yeah, no, I've really been enjoying it. Like it's a porter, so like for me it's still like it's a sipping beer, but it's got such a nice balance. Like the raspberry is there and it adds a nice like thing to it, but it's not all fruit. You still got like a nice sort of porter, like a good solid porter that's in the background there too with it. It all comes together really nicely and really well balanced. So I'm very happy with how this one has gone.
Nice.
All right. Well,
final thoughts? You have any?
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is that time. This is that time to try and share some of those, right? Yeah, I think that yeah, like just go. Like one of the things we had talked about, maybe calling this show, you know, get your shit out there, put your shit out there. Like just do it. Like you're ready enough for some step of this, and you're going to learn. You know, you're going to get yourself in the water, and you're going to pull that boat's going to pull you up, and you're going to, you know, maybe fall down a few times, but you're going to get yourself up there in no time at all. Like that's the thing. It's like it's not going to take you as long as you think to be seeing some progress, to seeing things happening. You know, but you've got to take that step. And the sooner you can do it, the better. The sooner you actually get that learning that is going to be the most functional and usable and help you to really understand what it is that you're doing. So just do it. Just do it. You're ready. You're ready enough.
Right on. Well, you know, I think there's room for improvement, and I think that you don't have to look at it like you don't have to be the best you'll ever be to begin. You know, you'll get better, but like just you got to start doing it so that you can actually start figuring it out. And like I think part of the problem is like a lot of people, they're scared that if they don't start and they're not the best or they're not awesome at it, that somehow that's like, a mistake or whatever. Like you're going to learn through feeling and you're going to be better as you go along. Like you don't have to put yourself into, like if it was a fighting situation, like say you're a competitive fighter, you don't have to put yourself into a competition fight, but you need to spar. You need to try sparring. You need, like working your techniques and working all that stuff's going to be great. But like until you spar, you're not going to know how your techniques actually play into a sparring match. So get yourself some of that grassroots, rubber meets the road, practical experience so you can work and build from that. Because until you have that, I just don't think that a lot of your theory and your practical understanding is really going to be all that valuable to you. One of the things that I try to do in my courses is I get people creating right away. I get them doing stuff right away. And part of the reason is because once you start doing it, you're going to start seeing what you actually need to do. You're going to understand what we're talking about, because I talk about this in the podcast sometimes, how I don't really teach theory, but I do teach theory, but I only teach theory once you've actually done something, because I've structured it that way. And I've reevaluated what I teach. And I was like, oh, I guess there is theory here, but the theory comes after you've done it. And the reason why I do that is because once you've done it, you have that practical real world experience on how to work with theory and you understand why it works. Another thing I'll mention, and I think this will help me just wrap this baby up from my side, but I have a client right now, and she started out of the gate in one of my classes doing some world-class work, like literally world-class, like just, you're like, wow, you're like protege level. Like you're like bringing in something that's just profoundly great. And then we worked next week, and this was the week before, we worked the last week, and we looked at it and we're like, wait a minute, this is actually not really helping achieve the goal we're trying to do. Like this is a great thing, but for like maybe a thriller movie, but the type of movie you're trying to do, this actually doesn't serve it. So we talked about, can we abandon these ideas? And what I'm so proud of her doing was she had great ideas that she was willing to abandon for better ideas she might come across. And so my point is that by doing it, she came up with great ideas. And, there's always a danger in applauding someone too early, because then they get these great ideas and they get attached to them. But the fact that she was willing to abandon great ideas for even better ideas, that's what this is, what I think Evan and I are trying to talk about. It's like, but once you're actually in it, doing it, you're going to find out, you're going to be wrestling it, handling it, working with it, and it's not always easy, but the thing is like when you have something to grab onto, it makes it a lot easier to like let go of it and actually try and grab on something else. If it's just theory that you're grabbing onto, you're not really grabbing onto anything. You're grabbing onto air, and then letting go of it isn't real anyway. And grabbing onto something else isn't real anyway. But when you're actually creating and you're doing it, you're doing it. And then if you let it go, you really feel letting it go. And that's an important part of the process of letting something go, grabbing onto something else, and, finding traction, if we want to call it that way. Find traction in your art.
Thank you for listening in on our conversation today. We hope you found something helpful that you can carry forward with you. Head over to our website, wayoftheartist.com, for more free exclusive material and learn about the show. If you haven't already, please support us by subscribing to the show, sharing it with people you know, and keeping compassionate, creative conversation going.